Trump will punish doctors and hospitals providing trans health care if elected president.
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures and pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. It'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable. We will also investigate whether Big Pharma or others have illegally marketed hormones and puberty blockers, which are in no way licensed or approved for this use. My Department of Education will inform states and school districts that if any teacher or school official suggests to a child that they could be trapped in the wrong body, they will be faced with severe consequences, including potential civil rights violations for sex discrimination and the elimination of federal funding. As part of our new credentialing body for teachers, we will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than erasing the things that make men and women different and unique. I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth. The bill will also make clear that Title IX prohibits men from participating in women's sports, and we will protect the rights of parents from being forced to allow their minor child to assume a gender which is new and an identity without the parents' consent. The identity will not be new, and it will not be without parental consent. No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody's ever heard of this, what's happening today. It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago. Under my leadership, this madness will end. Thank you very much.
In a recent video released on his social media platform, former President Trump vowed to punish doctors who provide gender-affirming health care to minors if he is re-elected next year, wading into a contentious debate that has captured the attention of state and federal lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. In the nearly 4-minute-long straight-to-camera video, Trump outlined his plan to, quote, protect children from left-wing gender insanity, end quote, unveiling a slate of extreme policy proposals targeting transgender identities, including a federal law that recognizes only 2 genders and bars transgender women from competing on women's sports teams. Trump also said that he plans to pass a law barring minors from receiving gender-affirming health care in all 50 states and intends to direct the Justice Department to investigate the pharmaceutical industry and individual hospitals to determine whether they, quote, deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich, end quote. As per the video, doctors treating transgender youth will be booted from Medicaid and Medicare under his leadership. The video also mentioned that his proposed policy changes would extend to education and school officials. All right, y'all, we have a lot to unpack here. I don't even know where to begin because there is, so it just is because there's a lot. The first thing that I want to just kind of stay out there is that he is one, history proves him wrong. That is that trans people have always existed. And the historical record is really, really clear. This is not something that people invented 3 years or whatever he said, right? That's simply untrue, and the historical record makes that very clear. There have been many gender expressions. There have been many forms of gender and sexual constructions, understandings, expressions, way beyond the binary of male and female, straight and gay, so on and so forth, right? He is absolutely wrong, and history proves him wrong. I also want to say, this is kind of opening us up to something else, but one of the things that has to happen, right? I mean, so clearly this is meant to be a juxtaposition between him and Ron DeSantis in many ways, right? That is, we could actually see a lot of parallels here between their platforms, right? That is very clearly pushing a very particular emphasis that puts trans people at the center of so many of these culture wars, right? This debate. But one of the things that has to happen as we kind of resist and push against all of this, right? The inherent sexism, the inherent transphobia, and in many ways the inherent racism. There's layers upon layers to all of this, right? One of the things that I would want us to learn from and take from the rule book is the reproductive rights movement. That is, if we think about, there's so many parallels here. The Hyde Amendment in 1976 that clearly didn't allow Medicaid, for example, to pay for abortion, right? There's so many steps that we should learn from the reproductive, the womanist movement. There's lots of things that we need to learn from so that we can target this kind of rhetoric and make sure that it's, defanged.
Yeah. Well, you know what really struck me is when he said, for the last few years, listen, I'm a trans woman of a certain age, and I've been transgender a very long time.
Yeah.
And I want to say an excellent book that shows the history of trans people here on the planet. It's called Transgender Warrior. And it is, I learned so much reading that book, and it shows that we have a history. We've been here. There's a paragraph on ancient artifacts that show depictions of trans people with the breast and a penis and that sort of thing. So that just really struck me. But another thing I want to say is that my girlfriends are like, girl, if you want to get anything done, you better get it done now, because who knows what's coming in 2024. You know what I'm saying? And it's a shame, because it really literally could do a 360 for us.
I'm sorry that you had to even think about that.
Yeah.
And besides the broad context, I don't need to read that book to completely voice a rejection of what we just watched him say. Because the trans community doesn't have to justify how long they've been around to say this is really repugnant what we watch. So I don't need the book, although I appreciate the history. The defense of the trans community does not mean you have to prove your existence. And that's
what I felt for a lot of my life. And actually that I've had to justify my existence and not have, and almost feel like I have to apologize for my existence, and so I tell you, it's scary. Hopefully he's not going to do, hopefully it's just a lot of hot air. He's not going to go anywhere.
No, take him at his word.
But let me tell you, what I'm really worried about is that DeSantis is going to get in the White House. And everything that Trump said in the video, I won't be surprised if DeSantis does the same thing. He
managed to bar trans people from serving in the military. I mean, over a tweet. Just as quickly there was I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I was thinking that this is from the man who, I guess this bill might be called, like, you can only grab people by their gender that they were born with. I won't use the word on air today. And a man who's been accused of sexual assault and is accused of multitude of crimes and is coming against and making this the focus of his campaign. It's pathetic. It's desperate. It's headline grabbing. And, it pains me that we have to cover it. Of course, it is a real story. It pains me to see, I've sat in PFLAG meetings with parents of very young children that are going through issues with their gender and seeing the pain and the struggles. And for this man to go on TV who has no information, has no agenda except for to create headlines, it's disgusting.
Right. And I mean, again, back to what we just discussed, this party that's supposed to be about limited government, right, is again invading. The part that struck me the most is parents being forced to allow. Like, those two words don't go together. Right. If you're a parent and you're allowed to do something for the health and safety of your child, and that's what you want to do, that should be it, point blank, period. No one is forcing you to take your child to receive gender-affirming care as the adult that is in the home. You are making that decision for your household. What I think is also interesting is there are a lot of other chemical processes that parents are okay with their children receiving, or surgical processes that their parents are okay with their kids receiving that are not being banned. Whether that's cosmetic surgery for 16-year-olds who want breasts or who want a nose job or all this, or even hair color, certain nail procedures you get at the nail salon that all have potentially long-term effects that are not being barred in the same way if we're really talking about the health of children. And I think that what is also scary to me is that we've seen Trump in the White House before, so it's not impossible, even with crazy rhetoric. And I just wonder how advocates will respond, organizers will respond. Are we learning any lessons from the wins and losses from around the country when we think about which Democratic candidate can stand up to that and what they're talking about, right? Because what we also know is that people understand that gender-affirming care is an issue, but they're also like, I can't even get to the point of care if I can't afford eggs.
Right? Hello.
If my kid's getting fed up in school, right? I can't even get to the point of care if I can't get insurance.
Right.
So it's like, how do we counteract these, what folks are calling culture wars, which I hate, but to talk about the real kitchen table issues that will bring more people to our side?
I have to tell you, a number of bullseyes here in our conversation. I just want to be, from my seat, I want to be really clear. You ask a very reasonable question that flows out of reasonable observation, but that's not at play. There is no desire to come to a real conclusion. That's not what he wants. And so we've got to understand, I think, our community has to understand over the next 2 years, we are facing opponents and foes. And I hate to use the word enemy, but we are facing enemies that are working out of a playbook that we've never seen before. For a president of the United States, who's what we just watched, that was the president of the United States to say what he just said. We've never seen language like that come out of a president of the United States. It's because the playbook is new, and we've got to approach it in a new way. Couple of notes.
I will push back on that because this is also the country of slavery. So we have seen presidents. We have seen presidents say, "Girl." And if we also know, history has taught us that across the globe, the enslavement of African people in this country was called different and unique because of the way Black folks were treated in this country compared to other places. So we have seen presidents that held people as cattle say really terrible things that they would like to also keep going.
Let me modify observation of modern television audience. Because I do hear you. It's very important for us to remember, why is he doing this? Did he say anything like this in 2016? Nothing even close.
It up.
What has changed in the last 5-6 years? Well, what has changed is he lost an election in 20 and Ron DeSantis. And so I think your observation is really important. And let me take a highlighter. He is comparing, contrasting to the other crazy that's going to be in the race. And so he's going out on this super extreme point of view to pull DeSantis out with him to compare and contrast. And we'll see what Governor DeSantis does next. Also, as it relates to that, remember, we've got to believe him. This is dramatic. We talk about gaslighting all of the time. I talk about DeSantis gaslighting all the time, Trump gaslighting all the time. That's what he did here. Now he says, my children, our children, our children, our children. In the middle of that verbal dump that we just watched, right in the middle of it, he says, I intend to ban gender transition of any age. One sentence, he says that deep in the middle. Wow. That is a dog whistle for the craziest of the crazy, because that's what he really wants to say. Children, 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 I mean everybody, children, 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 for the red meat of what he's doing. So he's contrasting with DeSantis and pitching for the real voter in the primary that's going to vote for him or DeSantis right from the very beginning. Third thing that I want to mention is we have watched this person talk about children. We watched DeSantis talking about children. We talk about the contradictions. But this also, you talk about the sexual exploitation. Let me talk about the basic stuff of the attack on medical and doctors, that they're just trying to get rich on our poor trans children. Excuse me. And this is coming out of the mouth of the person. Apparently, doctors are different than the hucksters that sell steaks, or their casinos, or their hotels, or their bad reality shows. Apparently, there's a difference between what he did and the doctors that are just trying to get rich on our children. And the last thing that I want to say is, we've watched this before. Well, I haven't seen it in my lifetime in Modern for President. You zero in on the issue of race. I was watching that, and frequently for me, to defeat gaslighting and making sure that I understand it, I try to provide comparisons to a black narrative of civil rights in America. Could this be justified in the exact same way? We had a governor in Alabama, George Wallace, that stood on the steps that justified no integration of my schools in Alabama, and justified and justified and justified. Wait, I don't care what the public says. I don't care what the Supreme Court says. I don't care what the President of the United States says. We just watched that. That's exactly what we watch in Donald Trump and what we're watching in Ron DeSantis. I humbly suggest this is becoming dangerous. It's becoming dangerous.
One more line that was very frightening in there was, he said he's focusing on the nuclear family of a man and a woman. So what does that do to all of our friends who have children from the LGBTQ community, who are two men or two women or two trans people? What does that do to that community? He is going after the man who has children with 3 women.
I was going to say,
and hasn't cared for any of them. Is going at, is the person of family values, and it's coming back in an even darker way than it did in his first election.
And why? Did his opinions change? No, it's to win an election. Power and money. That's what we're watching here.
If I may, I also just want to add, I know we want to talk about this forever, because in some ways it kind of only fuels the, but I also feel like when there's things that are not factually correct, that they have to be debunked. And that is just for those who are watching. The cartoonish way that gender transition is portrayed here is not at all what actually it looks like, right? That is, like, I've seen more sophisticated analysis of gender in episodes of South Park. Or this is not, it takes therapy, it takes years, it takes consent, it's not like you wake up one day trapped in a box. Like, this is not what it looks like. The language here is also, as we've all said, dangerous and not reflective of what it looks like.
Did anyone forget to mention Trump University?
The biggest.
Hello, the biggest one.
Wait, I just realized perhaps the problem here in analysis and his logic string is he actually went to. Maybe.
That's funny. I think it's so interesting, because that also makes me think about Florida's attack on social transitioning. So even this idea that not everyone transitions in a medical way, a surgical way, or hormonal way, all of those different things. There are some people that say, call me by my new name. This is my name. These are my pronouns. And I know in Florida, they're trying to even stop things like that in schools and all of that. But I also think, and this will be my last comment, whenever the straights get fixated on something like that, I'm like, what are your kids? What are your kids? Somewhere, like, why are you so involved in my bedroom, in my family? Like, what is it about yourself or the inadequacy you feel that maybe one of your kids has just come out or is trying to come out that you are trying to prevent that? And I think that we need to be very, very mindful as a people that no person in office should legislate and rule from their religious beliefs and their own personal beliefs. We need to be doing what's best for the most of humanity as we can, and attacking trans people is not it.
Amen.
Amen.
I tell you.
Not religion.
All right.
Three steps forward, 5 steps backward.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.